You have started it already, right? And have I explained it? It estimates how much bad debts we are going to write in the future, write off in the future. You need to remember that bad debts is an expense, and expenses are bad for profitability of the business. Because it's an estimate, we cannot write it off as an expense. We have to write it as a provision. We are simply applying the prudence gap principle, which says that when you notice that you're going to have a bad debt in the future, and you notice now, it's better for you to write that as an expense now based on just an estimate. Rather assume the worst than to assume the best. That's what it wants you to do. So that is why a difference in your provision is recorded as either income or expense. And as I said, guys, it's a valuation allowance that reduces trade debtors. And I did ask you guys to highlight that. It is a valuation allowance that reduces trade debtors. It is a valuation allowance that reduces trade debtors, right? Now you need to understand that the provision calculated by the entity from last year might be different to the one calculated this year. As I said, guys, this might be due to circumstances that prevailed during the financial year. And I explained what the difference is. If your provision that is given to you in the pre-adjustment trial balance is less than the provision that we calculated, it means the one in the pre-adjustment trial balance, we need to take it up to the one that we calculated, because the one we calculate at the end of the year is the accurate one. Okay. So if the one in the trial balance has to be taken up, we will recognize what we call provision for bad debts adjustments, and that will be an expense. But the final one that you calculate, we always subtract it from trade debtors. We subtract it from trade debtors, the one that we calculate at the end of the current financial year. However, if the provision in the trial balance is less, it's actually more than what you have calculated, the difference, we are going to recognize it as income. Okay. If the one in the trial balance is more than the one that we calculated, the difference will be recognized as income. And as I've said, guys, we'll record it as provision for bad debts under income. And I did say this, the one that we calculate, we are going to subtract it from trade debtors. Let's apply it in this example here. Provision for bad debts that is given to us in the trial balance is 7,000, right? And they said provision must be adjusted to 11% of trade debtors. They have different ways of saying this. They'll say it's 11% of trade debtors. Sometimes they'll say it's 11% of good debtors. So all of that is the same thing. It means that that is our debtors control. Whatever debtors control balance we have, we are going to calculate the final provision for bad debts based on that value. That's what they're saying to you. Now, when we calculate here, I'm going to start with the provision for bad debts that I have in the trial balance, which is 7,000 Rand. This is the 7,000 Rand. We calculated it last year. It was based on debtors control for last year. We need to calculate provision for this year. How would we calculate it? We are going to take our trade debtors. And how much is our trade debtors according to this example? It's 11%, but our trade debtors is not 11%. How much is it? It is 70,000. So you will take that 70,000 and multiply it by 11%. How much do you get? You will get 7,700. When you compare it to the one that is in the trial balance, is that higher or is it lower? It is actually higher. And since it is high, guys, it means the one in the trial balance is wrong. Why is the one in the trial balance wrong? Because it was based on last year's. This one is based on this year. So this is the accurate one. And now it means that the one in the trial balance, we need to increase it. And I did mention provision for bad debts increases on the credit side because it reduces debtors control. Debtors control increases on the debit side. So if provision reduces debtors control, it needs to increase on the credit side. I know some teachers will normally say it's a liability. That's nonsense. It's not a liability. It is just a valuation allowance that increases on the credit side. Others will say it's a negative asset. There's nothing like a negative asset in accounting. It's just that it increases on the credit side because it decreases your debtors control. And if it was a liability, it wouldn't be in trade and other receivables. It will be in trade and other payables. So this one, we're going to record it in trade and other receivables. But the reason why it increases on the credit side is solely the fact that it decreases your debtors control. And here, guys, I'm going to get 7,700, meaning the one that I have in the trial balance is wrong. I must increase it. Are we all together? Now, when I increase it, because this account increases on the credit side, it means my provision for bad debts will increase on the credit side, but the problem is the debit entries. The debit entry will be an expense. Why is it an expense? I just told you right now, provision for bad debts predicts the future bad debts. So it's a bad thing. So do you want it to go up? No, we don't want it to go up. That's why the increase is recognized as an expense. And we write it with the same name, provision for bad debts adjustment. All right. And then you're going to increase your provision with 700 Rand. And that is what you're going to have. And I explained to you, the one on the debit, it's an expense, and expenses increase on the debit side. The one on the credit, because it decreases debtors control, it will increase on the credit side. You wrote this, right? Okay. Now let's go to our provision for bad debts. This one is the one that I said to you, it increases on the credit side. The balance was 7,000, but now it's incorrect. That 7,000 is incorrect. We need to take it up to 7,700. It means that amount of 7,000 must be increased by 700 to 7,700. The provision for bad debts adjustment, though, is an expense. And because it's an expense, we are going to debit it and close it off against profit or loss. Remember, guys, income and expenses, we close them off against profit or loss. So the increase will be debited and the decrease will be credited. Here it was an increase, so the difference will be debited because it is an expense. When I prepare my, can I continue? When I prepare my statement of profit or loss, i.e. the income statement, that provision for bad debts adjustment, I won't put it under income. Instead, I'll put it under expenses, okay? But you only write the difference. The difference there will be 700 Rand. And that is because the one in the trial balance was 7,000. The one that we calculated is 7,700. So the one that we calculated is higher than the one that is in the trial balance. So that 700 becomes an expense because of that. I'm continuing. I'm going to continue. Trade and other receivables. We will start with trade debtors, which is our debtors control, but we call them trade debtors. It was sitting at 70,000. But from that trade debtors, we are going to subtract provision for bad debts. Which one are we going to subtract? The 7,000 or the 7,700? I said the final one, the one that you calculated is the one that you subtract from here. So I am going to subtract 7,700 and that will give you a net trade debtors. And I even wrote it there, the calculated amount. Your net trade debtors will be 62,300. Yes, yes. However, let us look at this one here. This one is different from the previous one. Everything is pretty much the same, except for what here. They said the account of a debtor A mortar must be written off, which is 900. Do you see now where the difference is? In this specific example, it means that 900 rand, it is still in the 81,000 rand. That 900 rand, when they say it must be written off, what do they mean? What must we debit? What must we credit? You debit bad debts, you credit debtors control or the name of the debtor. Guys, we did this not long ago, right? So it means that 81,000 rand, when we calculate our provision here, I can't use the 81,000 rand because that 81,000 rand was before a mortar was written off. I can't use it, okay? And that creates a problem. So do we all agree that the provision that we have in the trial balance is 9,811? Now, when I calculate my provision here, can I take that 81,000? What do I do? 81 minus 900. I'm glad you guys got that. We subtract because we credited debtors control. When you credit debtors control, it means you subtract from debtors control. Okay. And whatever is left will be the one that I multiply by 11%. And it'll give me 8,811. Then you compare the two. Which one is the correct one, red or blue? Blue is correct. So what must happen to red? Must it go up or down? And when it goes down, will it be income or expense? It is income. And this is how I got that 1,000 rand, if you're wondering how I got it. I'm going to start with that 900 rand. Okay, I'm gonna continue. That 900 rand you said, to write it off, what are we going to debit? Bad debts, what do we credit? Which is a motor in this case. That is data written off. All right, I'm gonna move on. Our provision for bad debts here, we are going to debit it. Why do we debit it, guys? Because our provision is decreasing, okay? And that is the only reason why we're debiting it. We credit provision for bad debt adjustments. Why do we credit that one? It's income. Thank you. It is income. Um, it, I prefer the debit first. The debit first all the time. Coming here, I'm going to start with my debtors control. The balance for my debtors control was a 1,000, but I had to reduce it by 900. Therefore, the remaining balance will be 80,100. Provision for bad debts, as I said, guys, it increases on the credit side. The balance was 9,811, but we need to reduce it by the difference, which was 1,000, to bring it down to 8,811, which is the value we want, the value we have calculated this year. When we start the following year, we will start with provision for bad debts sitting at 8,811. Yes. Coming here, I'll have provision for bad debts adjustment on the credit side. Why do I have it on the credit side? It's income. Someone might be confused that these accounts are the same. No, they're not the same. The other one has adjustments. It goes up on the credit if your provision decreases. It goes up on the debit if your provision increases. When it decreases, it means that it is income. So this 1,000 rand is income. And obviously we had bad debts, of which I'll close it off to profit or loss. Bad debts is an expense. It's a plus minus. In our income statement, provision for bad debts will be under other income, and bad debts will be under other expenses. Trade and other receivables. Trade debtors, it was 81,000, but that 81,000 was wrong. We need to reduce it by 900. So we'll be left with 80,100. And our provision, which one do we put in there? 9,811 or 8,811? 8,000, because that's the one that we calculated. That is the one for this year. Our net trade debtors will be the difference between the two. And I hope you notice, guys, that for provision, there's always brackets. Brackets mean what in accounting? We need to minus. We need to minus. All the time. Let us look at this one here. The entity received 20 cents in a rent from the insolvent estate of Timolefe, who owed 2,000. The transaction has been recorded in the cash receipts journal. It means that the 20 cents has already been recorded in the cash receipts journal. Now they want us to write off the amount still owed. Does that affect our debtors control? Positively or negatively? We need to subtract that. What is 80 cents? What is it? Dividend. No, the dividend is 20 cents. What is the 80? It is the bad debt. Thank you. The 80 will be the bad debt. In case you're lost, I took my bad debts will be 80%. I'm going to take the amount owed multiplied by 80%. It'll give me 1,600. That 1,600 is my bad debt. It is my bad debt. How do I record it though? David, bad debts, because it's an expense and credit, Timuli. Because it's a debtor, that also reduces our debtors control. Here are the explanations. To calculate the provision, the one in the trial balance is 8,500. The one that I need to calculate, what do I do? It's 110,100 minus 1,800. Is it 800 or 600? 600. And whatever is left, you will multiply it by 10%. It'll give you 10,850. The difference, is it an expense or is it income? It's an expense because the one in the trial balance must be taken up. That 2,350 is an expense. The reason why we subtracted that is because this is the bad debt amount. Please, guys, do this for homework. It's classwork 1. Classwork 2. And classwork 3. Please do all of them for homework. Okay. You too.